Okay, let's unpack this. Have you ever paused to think about how the very design of our cities subtly shapes our daily lives? It's more than just where we live. It's how we move, how we feel, even the air we breathe. I mean, we've all been somewhere, maybe exploring a new neighborhood, and just instantly felt a unique vibe, right? Today, we're taking a deep dive into the fascinating, complex world of urban expansion, city design, and their profound impacts. Our mission for you is simple: to extract the most important insights, the real nuggets of knowledge from a stack of recent research and reports. Think of it as your shortcut to being genuinely well-informed about the future of our urban spaces. We're going to explore how cities are growing, what their physical form means for us, the vital role of green spaces, and how we're, trying to manage the increasing density. So let's kick things off with a big picture question. We constantly hear about cities getting bigger, but what does that actually mean on a global scale? How do researchers even begin to measure something so massive and, well, dynamic?
That's a huge challenge. Researchers back in the early 2000s, like Angel and his colleagues, really started digging into how we track this growth. What's fascinating is how much the official maps of cities can sometimes hide the true story of urban sprawl. They found that different lists, like the UN Habitat list, actually give you a broader picture. They include more smaller cities, more Chinese cities, even places in, say, Algeria or North Korea. And crucially, they look beyond just administrative centers. They include places like Giza within Greater Cairo or, Quezon City in Metro Manila, parts of larger metro
Right,
areas.
so it's not just the city center itself, but the whole connected area.
Exactly. And to get a real sense of density, they use some pretty advanced techniques for the time computer-assisted processing of satellite data. Think Landsat imagery. They used it to classify built-up land for over 100 cities, comparing the 90s to the 2000s. And this highlighted a key point. Just dividing population by administrative area, it can give you a really skewed idea of density.
Ah, okay, so the actual physical spread is what matters.
That's it. They also found something interesting. While cities in high-income countries might use more land per person, the rate of expansion, the speed, is often much faster in developing nations.
That's a staggering thought. It sounds like the majority of future urban challenges, then, are really going to be concentrated in developing nations. What are some of the biggest, maybe, surprises or challenges that researchers like Bada highlighted looking at those future urban populations?
Yeah, Bada's projections from around 2010 were quite sobering. The global urban population is expected to surge to nearly 5 billion by 2030. And almost all of that growth, it's happening in towns and cities, mainly in developing countries. We're talking about urban populations in places like Africa and Asia, potentially doubling in just 3 decades, between 2000 and 2030.
Doubling. Wow. That scale of growth must have immense environmental consequences.
Absolutely. It's not just about more people.
So what does this exponential growth mean for the planet and our quality of life? What happens to the land itself?
Exactly. More recent research, like from Rahman and colleagues in 2024, really spells it out. This rapid urbanization, this shift from undeveloped land to built-up areas, it directly pushes up carbon emissions. Why? Well, you're removing the natural areas, the forests, the wetlands, that would normally absorb carbon, so carbon sequestration falls.
Right, losing the planet's natural sponges.
Precisely. Urban expansion, whether it's like sprawling outwards, getting denser, or building taller, is a key driver. Migration into cities fuels it too.
And are we seeing direct impacts on nature because of this?
Definitely. There's significant natural habitat loss. He and his team documented this in China back in 2014. Some
Ah,
really startling examples, like the Pearl River Delta losing over 30% of its wetlands. Other big metro areas lost 10–20% of natural habitats. It adds up.
30%, that's huge.
It is, and it's not just habitats. Think about temperature. Another study by Wing back in 2001, also in China, found urban development in the Zhejiang Delta actually raised the surface radiant temperature significantly. We're talking like 13 Kelvin higher in some cases. That's the urban heat island effect in action. Concrete jungles literally getting hotter.
Turning cities into ovens, basically.
Kind of, yeah. But there's also good news on the analytical side. Tracking and predicting this growth is getting much more sophisticated. Zhu and his team, just a couple of years ago, showed how advanced AI models, things like deep belief networks, combined with cellular automata simulations.
Okay, wait. Cellular automata. What's that?
Think of it like a grid-based simulation. It shows how urban patterns evolve block by block, predicting how development might spread. Combining that with AI gives much more precise forecasts for urban expansion. It can even help with better zoning decisions. It's almost like having a data-driven crystal ball.
A crystal ball for city planners. Okay, that's a powerful point about how cities are expanding. But beyond just getting bigger, how does the actual shape of these growing cities influence our daily lives? Does the layout really dictate how we live and move around?
It absolutely does. The physical layout, what planners call urban form, has a huge influence. A study by Brownstone and Golub back in 2009 showed a really clear inverse relationship. As residential density goes up,
So more people living closer together.
right, as density increases, average household annual mileage and fuel consumption both go down. It's quite stark. More compact living generally means less driving.
Makes sense. Less need to drive everywhere.
And that has direct environmental benefits. Bada's 2010 research connects the dots. Urban sprawl encourages car dependency. That means more fossil fuels burned, more greenhouse gas emissions, more pollutants like carbon monoxide contributing to poor air quality.
So sprawl is bad for air quality, basically.
Generally, yes. And it's not just density. Cervero and Kokelman, way back in '97, looked at this too. They found density itself has a bit of an impact, but other factors like diversity, having shops and services mixed into neighborhoods, and just the sheer quality of the walking environment.
Like good sidewalks, safe crossings.
Exactly. Those things have a stronger influence on whether people choose to walk for non-work trips. They even noted that older neighborhoods with gridiron streets and maybe less easy on-street parking tended to have fewer people driving alone.
Huh. Interesting. That raises a key question, though. How much of this is the environment shaping us versus our own choices? Do people just move to places that fit how they already want to travel, or does the place itself actually change their behavior?
Yeah, that's the classic residential self-selection debate. That's a tricky one. But studies like the ones Cowo and colleagues reviewed in 2009 consistently find that, yes, people do self-select to some extent. But the built environment still has a significant independent influence on travel behavior, how much you drive, how much you walk, even after accounting for those initial preferences.
So the place itself does still shape our habits, even if we choose it partly based on those habits.
That's what the evidence suggests. The physical place matters. And to encourage less car dependence, you have concepts like the PED shed, which Newman and Kenworthy talked about in 2006.
Ped shed, like a pedestrian shed.
Exactly. The idea is creating diverse urban amenities, shops, parks, jobs, whatever, all within a comfortable 10 to 30-minute walk. They suggest you need a certain critical mass, maybe around 35 jobs plus people per hectare, to make local centers and public transport really work well. It creates that vibrant, walkable neighborhood where you genuinely don't need a car for most everyday things.
A 10-minute neighborhood, basically. I like that idea. Okay, if we connect this to the bigger picture, how do we even get these city shapes in the first place? It's not all just random growth, right? There's planning involved. And what happens when the planning maybe doesn't quite work out as intended?
That brings us squarely into the world of zoning, how we legally regulate land use. You've probably heard of Euclidean zoning. It became the standard in the U.S. after a Supreme Court case in 1926. Burdett and York et al. Have written about this. It's famous for rigidly separating land uses, residential here, commercial there, industrial way over there.
Keep everything in its own box.
Pretty much. And historically, this system often treated higher residential density as sort of a social ill. This sometimes contributed to community fragmentation, and unfortunately, it could also allow low-income areas to end up or stay close to industrial hazards.
Not ideal. Is there an alternative?
Yes, there is. Burdett also talks about form-based codes. It's a different approach. Instead of focusing just on separating uses, form-based codes focus on the physical design, the building types, how they relate to the street, things stacked flats, courtyard buildings. The goal is to create more livable, integrated communities by emphasizing good design rather than just strict segregation of activities.
More about how it looks and feels, less about rigid categories.
Exactly. And zoning, whichever type, has massive economic impacts. Kendall and Tulip showed this really clearly in 2018. Rezoning land can dramatically increase its value. They had an example near Melbourne, I think a rural site, rezoned for housing jumped from maybe $120 million to $400 million.
Wow, that's a huge jump.
It is. And they estimated that in Sydney, zoning restrictions alone could be adding something like 73% to the price of a detached house compared to the marginal cost of building it. It's a huge factor in housing affordability.
73% just from zoning. That's kind of crazy.
It has a powerful effect, and it's not just a Western thing. Cao and his team looked at the land finance situation in China back in 2008. Local governments there can often lease land for industrial use very cheaply because they acquire it from farmers at extremely low costs. It highlights a pretty significant power imbalance where farmers often have very little leverage in those land acquisition deals.
Hmm. That's definitely a challenging side of urban growth. But okay, let's shift gears a bit. Let's look at a more optimistic angle. With all this urban expansion happening, what are we actually doing to make cities better, greener places to live? Can't all be doom and gloom, right?
Absolutely not. There's a huge focus now on urban green spaces, and for good reason. Research by folks like Podell and States in 2023 and Wang and Zhu just this year really emphasizes the crucial benefits. We're talking ecological, environmental, cultural benefits. They're vital for biodiversity, for our own well-being. It's all part of what planners call urban green infrastructure, or UGI. That includes everything from parks and green roofs to open forests, street trees.
So greening the city in lots of different ways.
Exactly. And it's not just about having green spaces, but also how we manage them. Podell and States made a great point. That perfectly manicured lawn, it might look neat, but it offers pretty limited ecosystem services.
Right, it's just grass.
Pretty much. But if you manage areas as diverse meadows instead, you get way more benefits. Increased biodiversity, better stormwater infiltration. It can even look more interesting aesthetically. It's about shifting from just neatness to creating rich, functional ecosystems within the city.
That's fascinating, thinking beyond the lawn. So how do our attitudes and maybe even technology play into how we actually use these green spaces?
Good question. Kim and Hall's research from 2022 looked into this. They found that public green spaces, combined with people's motivation, really do encourage active transport, walking, cycling. Just being aware of green space positively influences our attitude and our intention to, say, walk instead of drive. And here's a surprising twist. They found that how useful people perceived smart apps to be, like navigation or fitness tracking apps, significantly strengthened those relationships.
So apps can actually encourage us to use green spaces more.
It seems so. Technology can moderate that connection. And tech is also transforming how we manage the greenery itself. Aslanolu and colleagues, looking ahead to 2025, point to things like smart sensors, remote sensing, GIS mapping, even AI-based solutions. These tools are drastically improving the efficiency and effectiveness of managing urban green spaces, helping cities become more resilient and sustainable.
That's cool, but it's rarely a perfect picture, is it? Are there unexpected downsides or challenges that can crop up with urban greenery if it's not planned carefully?
You're right, it's not always straightforward. Aslanolu's team also flags some potential issues. Without proper planning, urban greenery can, believe it or not, inadvertently increase carbon footprints through things like soil respiration from maintenance. It can also worsen social inequalities if green spaces aren't distributed equitably. You can get green gentrification, where desirable green neighborhoods become too expensive, displacing lower-income residents.
The gentrification effect.
Yeah.
That's a real concern.
It is. And even simple things like planting the wrong type of tree can cause infrastructure damage or just fail to thrive, wasting resources. Adding to that, Wolch and her colleagues back in 2014 really highlighted this gentrification risk. While green space makes neighborhoods healthier and more attractive, that very attractiveness can drive up housing costs and property values. It could displace the exact people the green space was maybe intended to benefit. This really pushes the need for what they termed just green enough strategies.
Just green enough. What does that mean exactly?
It means finding a balance, providing meaningful green space benefits without triggering runaway gentrification. It's about protecting social sustainability alongside ecological sustainability, a really tricky balancing act.
A balancing act indeed. Just green enough. That's a powerful concept to think about. Okay, so what does all of this mean for daily life when we're trying to move around these complex, evolving urban landscapes? I mean, let's be real. Who hasn't been stuck in traffic, right?
Right.
I remember one time trying to get to a concert downtown. Should have been a 15-minute drive. Took me nearly an hour just crawling towards the parking garage entrance.
Yeah.
Infuriating.
Oh, definitely a relatable feeling. And it's not just a big city problem either. Surprisingly, even places like U.S. national parks deal with significant congestion. The National Park Service actually put out a congestion management toolkit back in 2014. It highlights how congestion jams up park entrances, parking lots, roads within the parks.
Even in national parks. Wow.
Yeah, anywhere people and vehicles converge, you can get bottlenecks. The toolkit outlines various strategies falling into a few key buckets. First, you've got additional capacity, basically building more space for vehicles. Though, interestingly, sometimes just repurposing existing lanes, like for buses, can actually reduce overall car capacity.
Okay, more space. What else?
Second, alternative modes. Improving and promoting things like park and ride facilities or shuttle services. A potential snag here is that park and ride, while helpful, can sometimes funnel more people into an area than it can comfortably handle, creating new pressures elsewhere.
Right, shifting the problem potentially.
It can happen. Then there's demand management. This involves strategies like encouraging people to travel at off-peak times. Arches National Park, for example, puts travel time info online to help visitors avoid the worst rush. This category also includes things like congestion pricing or incentives for using other modes. And finally, increased throughput. This is about making the existing system flow better through traffic operational improvements, signal timing, that sort of thing.
Makes sense. Managing the flow.
And related to that, for safety, especially where pedestrians are, they talk about traffic calming measures. These are things designed specifically to slow vehicles down. Think speed humps, narrower lanes, traffic islands, medians, and also traffic circles. It's worth noting they distinguish traffic circles meant to slow traffic and reduce intersection capacity from roundabouts, which are generally designed for more efficient vehicle movement.
Subtle but important difference. Speed humps versus efficient flow.
Exactly. Different tools for different goals.
We have definitely covered a lot today. We've taken a real deep dive into how our urban spaces are constantly evolving, from that massive global expansion and its environmental footprint to the subtle ways city design shapes our daily travel and the crucial, often complex role of green spaces.
What's truly fascinating, I think, is just how incredibly interconnected all these elements are. You've got policy, technology, design, human behavior. They're all constantly interacting, shaping the future of our cities. It's a complex system, no doubt, but understanding these connections is absolutely key if we want to build better urban environments for everyone.
Absolutely spot on. It all ties together. So here's a final thought for you to chew on. As cities continue to grow and adapt, how might future urban planning truly balance that desire for dense, efficient living with the very real increasing need for expansive, accessible green spaces for everyone? How do we actually create cities that are genuinely just green enough, achieving that tricky balance for both social equity and ecological well-being? We encourage you to look around your own community, observe how these powerful elements play out in your daily life. Thanks for joining our deep dive today.